Madam Speaker, I stand this evening to give this response with a particular sense of melancholy. The reason why I'm melancholic, Madam Speaker, is because this, as many members have highlighted, would be the last time that we'll have a budget delivered, and perhaps even the last time we may meet as Parliament. We do not know when the elections will be held, but they need to be held at least by mid of November. Madam Speaker, when we had the Parliament set up through the 2013 Constitution, and perhaps I, in my naivety, thought that when Parliament would get elected and Parliament would meet, that this would be a fantastic forum for us to be able to discuss new ideas, have input of new ideas, be able to discuss how we can take our country forward. We have a young population. Let's see all of us, what all of us in this Parliament could do. But, Madam Speaker, it did not happen. It did not happen because of the opposition's attitude. It did not happen because they did not portray or indeed display the sense of patriotism and nationalism, which is very critical, Madam Speaker, to take our country forward. We've had, Madam Speaker, racism in Parliament. We've had all sorts of lies being portrayed in Parliament. We'd have obfuscation of figures, obfuscation of facts, Madam Speaker. That has been the characteristic for the past 4 years. And, Madam Speaker, it is with great melancholy that I stand here to speak. In fact, I do not even feel like speaking, given the quality of the submissions from the other side. But, Madam Speaker, I want to respond to some of the issues, and I thank you for that. I would have probably prepared more notes if I knew I had a bit more time. But thank you, Madam Speaker, for that. Madam Speaker, I'd like to start off with the comments made by Honourable Kiliraki. He started by God. He said that we are godless. That's what he's trying to imply. Because this Constitution does not refer to God. Madam Speaker, Section 22 of the Constitution says, and I must read this, every person has the right to freedom of religion, conscience and belief. Subsection 2, every person has the right, either individually or in community with others, in private or in public, to manifest and practice their religion or belief in worship, observance, practice or teaching. Every person has the right not to be compelled to act in any manner that is contrary to that person's religion or belief, or take an oath in a manner that is contrary to the person's religion or belief, or requires the person to express a belief that the person does not hold. It goes on to say that every religious community, denomination, every cultural or social community has a right to establish, maintain and manage places of education, whether or not it receives financial assistance from the state or not. Madam Speaker, Honourable Kiliraki debunked the entire process, saying, because we are all going with no moral compass, there is no God. Madam Speaker, by mentioning God in the Constitution does not mean that God has left us. God is within us. I firmly believe that, Madam Speaker, and everybody must believe that. Every night when we go home and we go to pray, we all pray to God. It's not written anywhere, but we do pray to God. Madam Speaker, I can also highlight, when we had God mentioned in the previous constitutions, what shenanigans took place too. Madam Speaker, we had such a high crime rate. We did not have the yellow ribbon program. Nightclubs were closed supposedly for the Sabbath, or closed earlier, so people go to church. But guess what happened? Certain nightclubs were open because they bribed the police officers. Certain MPs used to go to those nightclubs themselves, would stand up in Parliament and pontificate about the Sabbath, but they were the ones attending that. We had bootleggers open at night. That's the level of hypocrisy that took place, Madam Speaker. And that, unfortunately, is the hypocrisy that's taking place on the other side again. Madam Speaker, we had people talking about families, but the leadership of the SVT and some of the ministers of SDL broke their marriage vows every night, or probably on a weekly basis. This is the level of hypocrisy, Madam Speaker. They talked about equal citizenry, but there's blatant racism practice, Madam Speaker, at administrative and political level. Jobs, promotions, etc. were done on a racial basis. We had quota systems, Madam Speaker. Certain jobs were taboo for certain ethnic groups. They talked about separation of powers, Madam Speaker. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, they were trying to compromise the independence of the judiciary to certain laws that were brought in Parliament, and we know what those laws are. Certain law firms, Madam Speaker, which some of them are using now, had privacy to access which judges were going to hear the cases. That was the practice, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they talked about protecting indigenous rights. They said that indigenous rights were protected in the 1997 Constitution. But guess what, Madam Speaker? Under both those constitutions, under supposedly a leadership of indigenous leadership, land was permanently alienated. Today we had yesterday Honorable Lalam Balawu saying, well, I did it legally. Yes, he did it legally. Nobody said he ever did it illegally, but the law was flawed. A few decades ago, it was illegal in America to get a white and a black person to be married. Does it make it right, therefore? Is it morally right? Is it ethically right? What he did, was it morally and ethically right? No, it wasn't. Just because it was within the law was flawed. And they want to go back to that constitution, and they want to go back to that leader who actually allowed it to happen. Madam Speaker, we had people pontificating about homosexuality being wrong. We should not have homosexuality. In fact, there was a law against homosexuality. And a lot of them practiced homosexuality. But during the day they went to pontificated against it. That was the hypocrisy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we had retirement age reduced from 60 to 55. Guess by who? Sitiveni Rambuka. They never mentioned that. It was Garasi who increased it to 60. They never mentioned that, Madam Speaker. I'm highlighting all these issues because it highlights the fact the contribution that they have made actually is bereft. It's bereft of, Madam Speaker, credibility. Madam Speaker, when we had announced that we're going to have a Ministry of Economy, unfortunately the Honourable Leader of Opposition in the House, over here in Parliament, started listing the names of all the Muslim countries that Ministry of Economy. She forgot to mention Israel, which they always talk about. She forgot to mention Cook Islands, many other non-Muslim countries that Ministry of Economy. We had another leader, another MP, who was then, he's no longer with us. Started listing names of all these Muslims who are apparently in government. We could have done a list of names of all the people who are non-Muslims, people who eat okay, people who are Hindus, people who are Madrasis, people who are Punjabis. We could have done all of that, but we did not do that. That's the level of contribution, Madam Speaker, that they made. Of course, Madam Speaker, in all of this, NFP has remained definitely quiet. Madam Speaker, again, Madam Speaker, when we stood up in Parliament, Madam Speaker, when we stood up over here and talked about the detrimental effects of the 87 coup, the financial debacle that followed after the NBF, Madam Speaker, they defiantly remained dumb about it, Madam Speaker. The only thing that he said, Honourable Viman Prasad, he does not support coups.
Madam Speaker. I think the Honourable Attorney General is making an accusation which is entirely incorrect. Madam Speaker, we all know the party's position on the 87 coup, on the 2000 coup, on the position of racism. And so for the Attorney General to come out and keep accusing the National Federation Party of supporting that kind of view, I think is repugnant, and I think he should stop that, because it's a direct accusation to the party. And we are not, and we are saying that that's irrelevant, and it's a pack of lies, and he should stop that, Madam Speaker. He should withdraw that.
Honourable member, your point of order. In your point of order, you're referring to the content of the speech made by the Minister for Economy, and that does not qualify under the point of order process. And therefore, I rule your point of order out of order. Honourable Minister, please continue.
Madam Speaker, if the Honourable Leader of NFP listened to me, I said the only thing he said is they don't support coups. He did say that in Parliament. But he never said anything else after that. That's my point. They may say these things outside, but in this Parliament, they never objected to what was said over here. Never. Madam Speaker, they never stood up and said that. Madam Speaker, yet, again, he did not comment on the NBF debacle. Madam Speaker, I, in fact, harassed Honourable Biman Prasad about Professor Anirudh Singh. He only talked about Brisbane. Madam Speaker, why?
Madam Speaker, point of order again, Madam Speaker. Let me seek clarification from you, Madam Speaker, on this issue. The Attorney General make references to Dr. Anirudh Singh, Dr. Som Prakash, and I've said this before. When he talks about me not standing up, I don't have the kind of time and space that he has the right of response.
No, sir.
There are issues that I have said, but for him to continue to accuse the National Federation Party and me of condoning things like Anirudh Singh's torture. Mr. Speaker, I was the president of the Fiji Youth and Students League, which actually mounted mounted nationwide protest against the torture of Dr. Anurudh Singh, and Dr. Mahendra Reddy sitting there, Honorable Reddy sitting there, knows that. He was part of Fiji Youth and Students League. So I think, Madam Speaker, that the Attorney General should stop accusing me and the National Federation Party, because we have always opposed any coups, any form of racism, and any form of torture or harassment of people on the basis of race or religion or color. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Minister of Economy, I beg your indulgence, but some of the issues that have been mentioned, I'd like to ask you to take that into consideration. Otherwise, this is going to be brought up over and over again in your presentation. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I am simply commenting on the comments that have been made on the floor of Parliament. Madam Speaker, and I have said, and this is factually correct, the Hansard can be checked, that whenever these things have been mentioned, they have not said anything at all. The point being, Madam Speaker, which is what this is leading up to, is that there is not just intellectual dishonesty, but there is an absence of stating the facts, and a hesitation to actually mention what is correct. That is the point that I'm trying to drive at, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, if I can just complete that. What, Madam Speaker, the reason why he's saying that, Madam Speaker, he only has highlighted, only until today, when we actually harassed him to do so, he only talks about Bridge Lal, because Bridge Lal perhaps he thinks will increase his political fortunes. The theory behind all of this, Madam Speaker, is there is selective use of information. That is, Madam Speaker, the main point. When a few months ago when I did say that, you see, Madam Speaker, the reason why he's reacting to it, because he knows it's a fact. Madam Speaker, what the NFP also failed to mention, Madam Speaker, and they have never said this, never in the 4 years have said this, that the actual drop of sugarcane farmers from 20,000 to 12,000 farmers in 2006 was a direct result of the non-renewal of leases under the SVT and the SDL government, Madam Speaker. They have never acknowledged it. He talks about it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, so, Madam Speaker, the reality is that they don't want to publicly criticize these two parties. And that's why, Madam Speaker, because obviously they're cuddling up to them and they want to probably get into bed with them later on. Madam Speaker, I want to highlight this to demonstrate that everything that the opposition and their analysis and the contribution lacks merit, it lacks credibility, and therefore the analysis of the budget is simply driven by political machinations and considerations. How can we object to a budget that allows increasing maternity leave? How can we object to a budget that allows an increase in introduction of paternity leave? How can we object to a budget, Madam Speaker, that inculcates the culture of savings and giving $1,000 for babies, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, how can we object, as Honourable Mr. Martin very eloquently stated, about the merits of having workers' compensation put under ACCF, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, this is the point, that they have come to this debate without any evidence based on empirical evidence, no facts. They have in fact completely missed out mentioning a number of people who've actually talked highly about the economy, Madam Speaker. Their, Madam Speaker, contribution in the past couple of days has been predominantly personalized, implicitly or indirectly racialized. Implicitly or directly racial chauvinism has come into it too, Madam Speaker. When Honourable Nawai Kula, Madam Speaker, it bothers me, makes ridiculous comments, lies, and harps on how he's lost because of the laws. He calls it decrees. He refuses to accept the fact it's a law, it's an act. And this again, Madam Speaker, a defiance. Is a particular quality of standard that's been dropped, Madam Speaker. It is, Madam Speaker, it's dropped. The quality of contribution is dropped. He's brought disrepute, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, when he does all of that, and everybody is a bit of love, I actually look around him, I see Honourable Gavoka, Honourable Lavere, Honourable Sultan Rondondro, Honourable Bandei, all sit around and clap and laugh. All of them. I worry about it, Madam Speaker. I worry not just about this mob mentality and their support of intellectual absence, but I worry about what lies and nonsense they must be feeding the public outside this Parliament, Madam Speaker. I shudder to even think about what would happen if these people were ever in government, Madam Speaker. God forbid. God forbid, Madam Speaker. I shut up, Madam Speaker, to think about what would happen to our children, what would happen to our future, and indeed what would happen to our economy. They want to give away this land, they want to give away that, without any financial acumen, without any financial analysis. Oh, we want to give this away. Oh, you're going to do this. Let's have a linear development to the economy. Oh, you can't actually build that building because you have to do this first. Or you can do it all together. That's the point. They don't have understanding of, very strictly, Madam Speaker, financial integrity. How to run an economy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we had Honorable Randondro, Senator Randondro, when I was actually giving my budget address. She said, how can you have operating surplus when you have debt? Madam Speaker. I mean, this is again Finance 101. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, they have been, please check the hands up. Madam Speaker, they've been bereft of ideas, bereft of display of intellectual input, bereft of a vision, bereft of concern for ordinary Fijians, bereft of, Madam Speaker, I would say true patriotism and true nationalism. I can actually die for my country, Madam Speaker. I really believe that, and I can do that. Because I am here, Madam Speaker, not to fill my pocket. I'm not here to further any social status. Madam Speaker, I can do much better outside. Madam Speaker, but I'm here because I have a commitment and I believe in the leadership of our Honourable Prime Minister. I'm not here to further, Madam Speaker. Yeah, they're not here. I'm talking about people who are here. Madam Speaker, we're not here to further our personal agenda, nor some racial agenda, or ethnic agenda, or provincial agenda, or religious agenda, Madam Speaker. We are here, Madam Speaker, because we are concerned about our country. And Madam Speaker, as the theme of this budget says, Madam Speaker, we are concerned about Fijian families. Madam Speaker, I would like to say that the Honourable Minister for Economy, Shadow Minister for Economy, I should say, I actually did feel sorry for him. Because his thunder was stolen away by his leader who's outside, who decided to do his own analysis of the budget on video, on YouTube. He did it a couple of days before that. He stole his thunder. Completely unheard of, Madam Speaker. Even when the Honourable Leader Rotemumu Kepa used to run the party, and Honourable Prasad was the spokesperson for the opposition for economy, she never did that. Because that's his job. Now, his job is being taken away by somebody else. So I actually kind of felt a bit sorry for him. I won't be very harsh on him. Madam Speaker, but the facts are crystal clear. We are enjoying our longest period of economic growth in Fiji, 9 consecutive years of growth, never experienced in Fijian history before, Madam Speaker. I mean, I know that the Honourable Member may have been a bit, shaken up by what had happened on the YouTube. I mean, he sort of talked about let's breed horses instead of goats. I mean, Madam Speaker, this is not even worth responding. We don't eat horses. We ride horses, Madam Speaker. At least in Fiji, we don't eat horses. Madam Speaker, we have delivered this impressive growth performance during a period when we were struck with devastating natural disasters like TC Winston and the recent back-to-back cyclones and massive floods. Madam Speaker, this economic feat could only be delivered by the Fiji First Government. Madam Speaker, Honourable Randondro goes on to say that this 9 years of consecutive growth is delusional and claims that under the current SODELPA leader, the average growth rate was 4.2%. Madam Speaker, that is hypocritical. As clarified by the Honourable Prime Minister, the average growth under the Rambuka government was not 4.2%, but in fact only 2.3%. However, the leader of SODELPA quickly issued a press statement yesterday evening again on YouTube that continued to mislead the public by saying that growth in 1995 was 4.5%, when the actual growth rate was only 2.5%. Another gross misrepresentation, Madam Speaker. And as we have said before, they can blatantly lie in Parliament, Madam Speaker. Imagine what they are saying outside. Madam Speaker, also the leader outside of the outside leader of SODELPA also wants to take credit for the 8.7% growth in 1999 when his SVT government lost the elections. How can he take credit for growth in the economy when SVT was not even in government for most part of the year? Similarly, Madam Speaker, he is also taking credit for growth in 1992 when he was only elected in mid-year. In fact, Madam Speaker, his press statement last night was riddled with untruths, and his shadow minister proclaimed the same thing earlier in Parliament. The reality, Madam Speaker, is this. Fiji saw its largest economic contraction of 6.4% when Sitiveni Rambuka staged his first coup, and then of course in May, in the second coup in September of 1987. Confidence in the economy plummeted, and many Fijians fled their homeland. The brain drain and loss that resulted from the massive exodus left a huge vacuum that has taken us years to rebuild, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Fiji First Government's track record in the economy is very clear. At independence, Madam Speaker, our GDP stood at around 0.2 billion. And it took almost 40 years for Fiji's GDP to reach 5.5 billion. That's a fact. It can be verified. However, Madam Speaker, it took Fiji First just 10 years to double this to around $11 billion, Madam Speaker. It was under Prime Minister Benny Mrama's leadership, Madam Speaker, that Fiji graduated to become an upper middle income country. Anyone can verify this, but of course the opposition will not accept the truth because it plucks things out of the air. This is how, Madam Speaker, we have created around 43,000 jobs and brought unemployment to a 20-year low of 4.5%. Yet again, Madam Speaker, Honourable Leader of Opposition in Parliament chose to refer to dated statistics, claiming unemployment to be 6.3%. Out of sheer ignorance, Madam Speaker, ignorance. It's, in fact, outdated statistics that she was using. Maybe the people who wrote this piece for her decided to use that. The economy under the Fiji First Government has thrived, Madam Speaker, and Fijians can attest to this. That's how we managed to almost triple our tax revenues and undertake bold strategic investments in modernizing our roads, expanding access to water and electricity, to be able to introduce numerous social welfare programs, including the $100 social pension allowance and the $19 disability allowance. And Honourable Minister for Social Welfare has spoken a lot about this matter. That's how we were able to invest $1 billion in education. That's how we managed to fund new and innovative ideas that have lifted the standard of living of Fijian families. Madam Speaker, Honourable Randondra spoke at length about traffic congestion. It is such an irony for the opposition to say this, as many of them now have ownership of their own cars under the Fiji First Government. I wouldn't be surprised some of them more than one car. Madam Speaker, but what they're proposing is a very elitist attitude. I want to give a small story. I have a driver who's been driving for me, Saki. He's been there for nearly 7-8 years. He's got a family of 5. He wanted to own a car. That's his ambition. He wants to be able to drive his children down to Deumba on the weekend. His time off. He's never taken his family around Vitilevu. And guess what? He bought his first car. He's able to take them around Vitilevu. What a great experience for his family. He doesn't drive his car everywhere. Madam Speaker, to say because of this traffic congestion has taken place and therefore we should restrict the number of cars on the road is very elitist. Very elitist. But, Madam Speaker, what really should be spoken about is how we're going to solve the traffic congestion. We have already mentioned in this Parliament, Madam Speaker. For example, the real traffic congestion takes place between Nasori and Suva. Now we're doing a 4-lane road. We've also said in Parliament, Madam Speaker, we'll have bus lanes, encourage people to take buses. We are getting, duty has been reduced on buses to encourage new buses. Because most people who work as lawyers and accountants, various other jobs, don't want to catch a bus. We have to make buses more attractive. People don't want to sit in a bus with a tarpaulin on it. They like proper windows. So the quality of buses need to be improved. We need to have dedicated bus lanes, have parking bays for people to come. So for example, if I live in Davulevu, I'll come to the main road, there's an area for me to park, jump on the bus, get to work in 20 minutes, back home in to my car in 20 minutes. On the weekends I drive my car. That's what happens overseas. That's the plan. That's what we are doing, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me highlight also again the Shadow Minister for Economy also was absolutely correct to highlight the significant cost of political instability. He talked about that. It is under the current Sodelpa leader's prime ministership, Madam Speaker, that Fiji lost the National Bank of Fiji, something which he tries to duck and weave now. Madam Speaker, let me quote what the late Savinatha Siwatimbau, the former governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, said on the NBF issue. Highly respected and esteemed economist. And I quote, Madam Speaker, Mr. Siwatimbau said this: the new management installed after the 1987 military coups did not have the depth and the breadth required to run a bank. Government's effort to muzzle the media and its refusal to launch a commission of inquiry into the litany of abuse which resulted in the collapse of the NBF is a serious indictment of the sorry state of governance in the public sector in the country. He continues, Madam Speaker, and I quote to say, and I quote, for the nationals and residents of Fiji, the cost and burden of the scandal which now they collectively bear is enormous. By the time this amount is repaid in full, the taxpayers of Fiji will have paid over $300 million then. That was more than 10 years ago, Madam Speaker, and the cost today is twice that. He adds, Madam Speaker, and I quote again, The transfers to the NBF ballooned the government budget deficit and escalated the level of domestic public debt. Creative debt maneuver was then employed to bring down the debt level. Government sold part of its holdings in the ATH to the FNPF at a price much higher than the offer by external tenders. So effectively, the burden of the cost of the NBF scandal was shifted onto members of the FNPF, unquote. And these people, Madam Speaker, talk against the reforms of the FNPF. Madam Speaker, for the past 20 years, under the SVT government, the SDL government, World Bank, other international organizations have been telling me to reform FNPF, otherwise the monies will finish by 2052. There were people getting paid 24% return, 19% return, 15% return. And most of the people are the elites, which you are probably speaking for, Madam Speaker. There are many people, Madam Speaker, the low-income people, our young people. If we continue down the path of FNPF, when they retire, there would have been no money. Yes. No money. 2052, no money. That's why the reforms are carried out. And they're coming here to this Parliament, Madam Speaker, and speaking for a few hundred people, forgetting about the other 400,000 FNPF members. The very nature of superannuation fund pooling is you have a shared risk. You don't have others benefiting more than those who are not. Madam Speaker, under the reforms, of course, I want to highlight, there are some pensions prior to the reforms who were getting $5 a month, $10 a month. Now nobody receives less than $100 a month. Madam Speaker, the opposition blatantly ignored this when they spoke about debt. They lament government debt, but we are only borrowing for capital spending, Madam Speaker, whereas an astronomical amount of public funds have been chewed up in the single largest financial scandal that we're still paying for today. The fact is almost $1 billion has been spent on the NBF disaster. We're still repaying the interest on this, Madam Speaker, and this will continue for generations. This is the most disastrous mishandling of the economy we have ever seen in our history. And yet the same leader is shamelessly vying to lead the country again. But the public know the true character, Madam Speaker, of this person and will not be fooled again. What transpired then was totally irresponsible, Madam Speaker. And they have the audacity to call this budget irresponsible when everyone else have said otherwise about the credibility of this budget. People, Madam Speaker, used to go with paper, handwritten notes by ministers. This is a fact. We've seen it. Give this man $50,000. Security or guitar, drum kit set. It's there. Read the detailed records. It's all there. Madam Speaker, I want to talk about government debt now. Some have claimed debt to be at $6 billion. Some are saying $6.5 billion. And some have gone to the extent of saying that our debt is around $8 billion. Madam Speaker, the reality is that our debt as of July 2017 stood at $4.67 billion and is expected to be around $5.17 billion by the end of this fiscal year. But $2.8 billion of this debt was inherited from previous governments. And they have said, yes, this happens for all governments, yes. But they also need to acknowledge the fact that $2.8 billion is from the previous governments. We have actually paid over $2 billion in interest payments alone on the debt of previous governments. To compute this simple, Madam Speaker, but such simple things obviously are hard for the opposition to grasp. Let me explain briefly. A 7% annual interest cost on this $2.8 billion debt equates to $196 million. And thus, over 11 years, this accumulates to over $2 billion. Madam Speaker, anyone that has a basic understanding of economics or finance, or even with basic common sense, should know that we should not look just at the nominal debt numbers in isolation. And anyone that does that is actually trying to mislead or create false panic, as Honourable Minister Reddy highlighted, about debt. Madam Speaker, the debt, government debt should be measured relative to the size of the economy, or GDP. Try to use an ordinary person's example. Person earning $30,000, person earning $500,000, what's the capacity to take debt? The economy or the GDP is the income of the country, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, by that measure, our debt to GDP ratio stood at 45.6% at the end of the last fiscal year, the lowest in 15 years. Also, Madam Speaker, agencies such as IMF have clearly commended the Fijian government for reducing its debt to GDP ratio by 10 percentage points in the last 6 years. None of them quoted IMF on that basis. Madam Speaker, our debt to GDP ratio is expected to slightly increase to 47% due to a large post-disaster spending. Had we not spent close to $500 million in the last 2 financial years on disaster rehab, Madam Speaker, our debt position would have been close to 40% as a percent of GDP, Madam Speaker. Of course, they'll come here and say that bridge is not done, that crossing is not done. It costs money. We have to borrow money to build this after the floods, after the cyclones. We have to build government quarters. We have to build schools. Nonetheless, Madam Speaker, our debt position is still sustainable. And this has been validated by various agencies, including the IMF, the World Bank, ANZ, Moody's, and other credible financial institutions. Dr. Christy Sen was here. Honorable Prasad did not mention him. I understand they knew each other. Madam Speaker, in fact, all our lenders, and more recently, the European Investment Bank, is eagerly offering, Madam Speaker, additional loans on concessional terms. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with a representative of EIB, European Investment Bank. They said, we've been told to lend you at least 15 million euros every year or every 2 years. They see a lot of potential, but we ourselves are saying no, because we have to have the capacity to be able to use the funds, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, because of fiscal strength and prudent financial management. This is completely indication of saying don't believe ANZ. Madam Speaker, but the opposition, of course, ignored this. They ignored the recent budget. They ignored the recent budget analysis by ANZ International Economist, Dr. Christy Sen, who clearly labelled the budget as responsible. Madam Speaker, the point that we have continued to drive at in this Parliament is that debt is not bad if it's used to invest in building productive capacity. This is basic economics. Honourable Randondo, I think, talked about electrification. In the budget, we have an allocation of $50 million for rural electrification, Madam Speaker. We have to be able to have, she's saying not enough. We have to have the capacity to actually put in the lines. You need the personnel to put it in. You don't just put a figure and then it sits there with nobody able to implement it. But the reality is, Madam Speaker, what she fails to tell Parliament, this is the highest level of spending in electrification. Madam Speaker, this is of course basic economics. All borrowings by this government, Madam Speaker, has been for capital expenditure. We also have a larger operating savings around $800 million compared to mere $27 million in 2006. These operating savings, Honourable Randondo, are also directed towards capital expenditure. Madam Speaker, as a comparison, since 2007 we have spent double the amount in capital expenditure than previous governments from 1970 to 2006. But for every dollar of capex, we have borrowed only 33 cents, as opposed to previous governments that borrowed 76 cents for every dollar in capex spent. What that means, Madam Speaker, is because we have a larger operating surplus, we're able to use that for more capital expenditure. In fact, Madam Speaker, we are the only government that has been spending to a tune of 40% of its budget on capital expenditure. This is a Fiji first legacy, Madam Speaker, and one that is hard to beat. Madam Speaker, the opposition stated that our debt to person is $6,500. This is not fully true, Madam Speaker. But more importantly, a fact that they completely ignored, this is what I call obfuscation facts, is that our income per person has risen to around $12,000. They deliberately omitted this to suit their own agenda, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we talked about civil service contracts. I will quickly get on to that. We're spending a bit of money on that. About civil servants being on contracts and uttering about bringing back permanent employment terms. But what are they trying to preach, Madam Speaker, is far different from what they're actually practicing. The Sodelpa camp, Madam Speaker, admitted publicly that their staff cannot be paid overtime as they're on contracts. Madam Speaker, isn't that hypocrisy? How can they even think about running the country when they can't even manage their own internal affairs? Even deciding upon paying overtime to their own staff. Madam Speaker, this is what Sodelpa is all about. They say one thing and do the complete opposite. This is my beginning of the introduction of my speech this evening, Madam Speaker, was about the hypocrisy that's taking place, the contradictions, and in fact the paradoxes that are taking place. Our objective for civil service, Madam Speaker, reform is very clear. We want a modern, high-performing civil service that is responsive to government priorities, Madam Speaker. At the top of the list of priorities is providing equal quality service to all Fijians. And equally, we are promoting a culture, Madam Speaker, and a system where recruitments are transparent, fair, and purely based on merit, and rewards are based on performance. We will not compromise set standards that are premised on international best practice. Contrast this, Madam Speaker, with the sentiments touted by the other side when they outwardly appear sympathetic or empathetic. But really, it is a ploy to bring back the old system of appointments based on who you know, an old boy, old girl, status and where you come from, with the connections. But this is, Madam Speaker, how they will run the civil service, Madam Speaker. Not following independent processes that are transparent. In fact, Madam Speaker, I felt rather offended, or felt sorry for the Secretary General, who's been roped into this by the Honourable Shadow Minister for Economy, talking about her work employment, talking about her family. Madam Speaker, the reality is that we cannot use this kind of emotives, and I feel really sorry for her. I mean, this is cheap to do that. It is very cheap. And Madam Speaker, he's saying now that because somebody's got a family, then therefore we should renew their contract irrespective of how they perform. Madam Speaker, we are not running a charity. If you work in the private sector, you don't perform, you don't get your contract renewed. Why should it be different for the civil service? Who are you concerned about? The 894,000 Fijian citizens who the civil servants are supposed to serve? Or are we worried about a handful of people who are not performing? Obviously, there's some civil servants who are high performers, very good performers. Some civils are excellent. They put in the extra mile. And guess what? The civil service reform actually recognizes them. They will get bonuses for that, Madam Speaker. The system actually allows for that. The salaries actually, Madam Speaker, have increased for civil servants. Madam Speaker, I have to say this in Parliament. Just this week, while sitting, just yesterday, and last week also, I had to agree to the termination of a teacher who got primary school kids who he was teaching, got them to drop their pants and play with their testicles. I had to agree to the termination of another person who fondled some high school girl. They come here portraying all civil servants as if they're coated in milk and honey. Madam Speaker, the reality is that these things do happen. These things do happen. The reality is, Madam Speaker, that the provision of employment does allow that. The contracts do allow for that. We want teachers to be high performers. We have continuously said that teachers' contracts will be automatically renewed every 5 years. They come here and say they won't get loans. What nonsense! What nonsense! You go to the private sector. I worked in the private sector. Many of them have not worked in the private sector. I worked in the private sector, Madam Speaker. I had a contract for 3 years. I got loans for 2 houses. I could afford it in my salary. But they gave me a loan just because I had a contract for 3 years. Doesn't mean that it didn't give me a loan. This is the type of contribution we've had in Parliament. They're trying to conjure up those ill feelings, not discussing these issues based on facts. Madam Speaker, Honourable Salvatore Randrondo selectively spoke on the 2 women foreign permanent secretaries. They are also acting PS for other portfolios.
Madam Speaker, we note the extended time that has been given to the Honourable Minister for Economy for his right of reply. Can you just clarify how much more time from the normal 20 minutes that usually given? Because it looks like it's going to take normal time, same time has been given to him on the budget address. I think it's more than 20 minutes now.
I had already announced that I will give him extra time for his right of reply.
How much more time?
The reasons I mentioned.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, Honourable Salvatore Randrondo selectively said that the 2 foreign women permanent secretaries are also acting PS for other portfolios. But what she did, Madam Speaker, she ignored the fact that the Fijian Permanent Secretary, Yogesh Karan, is also not just the Permanent Secretary for the Prime Minister's Office, but also acting PS for waterways, and also PS for sugar, also PS for immigration. Acting Permanent Secretary for Agriculture, David Kolitaka, the Permanent Secretary for Agriculture, sorry, Madam Speaker, is also the acting PS for Infrastructure and Transport. The PS for Itauki Affairs, Naipota Katoni Tambua, is also acting PS for Fisheries. Why is she doing this selectively? You see, Madam Speaker, what they're doing is basically pushing towards one direction. Built into that, Madam Speaker, there's a bit of xenophobia, bit of ethnicity, all of this, you know, bit of a masala. You see which one you can catch, which spice you will catch. That's what's happening, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker said, why aren't they advertised? The PSC is going to advertise it. The PSC is an independent body. Public Service Commission, Madam Speaker, is the employer of permanent secretaries. And it's provided for in the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Head 50 has been spoken a lot about, and Madam Speaker, I basically believe that it's not only about, again, there's a bit of masala being thrown in, it's personalized. But I just want, Honorable Buniwanga and other ministers have spoken about it, but I just want to turn them to this book. If you look at the estimates, if they look at page 339, if they look at page 340, it says, Head of Expenditure, Program Activity Standard Expenditure Group, a responsible officer. Look at that. Who needs to sign off? Madam Speaker. Page 339 and 340. Madam Speaker, and they are permanent secretaries, Madam Speaker, if they also bothered to read, Madam Speaker, the laws, Madam Speaker, under the, Madam Speaker, under the Financial Management Act 2004, it says the permanent secretary is responsible for managing the financial affairs of the ministry in accordance with the requirements of the FMA. Section 28 says, Madam Speaker, a permanent secretary is responsible for inter alia the effective, efficient and economical management of the agency. That's what it says in the law. Madam Speaker, if they bother to read the laws, they need to read the gazettes. They need to read the gazettes. In the gazette, Madam Speaker, in the gazette, it says that the permanent secretary for economy will be the person who will approve all RIEs, all expenditure up to $1 million. We changed this. Previously it used to be that if it was a project less than $1 million, then the PS could deal with it. Now it's a sum of $1 million. In other words, Madam Speaker, in practical terms, if Honourable Minister Seriratu has some project which is under RIE and say it's a $20 million project, and every time they require funds, 900,000, 500,000, even though it's a $20 million project, a $50 million project, it never comes to the minister. It is dealt with by his PS and the PS for economy. The reason why Head 50, Madam Speaker, actually has a large allocation, again if they bothered to read, Madam Speaker, it has $255 million, Madam Speaker, in it for TELS. Now, it will be put in Head 50. Honourable Lawere, in his capacity, said, why isn't it put in Ministry of Education? It's a loan. Loans aren't put in expenditure heads. It's a loan. So, it's put in Head 50. And Head 50, Madam Speaker, is then when TSLB says to the PS for economy, we have now 5,000 students in USP, we need to pay USP the fees, they provide the acquittals, the PS for economy releases the fees. That's why Head 50 has got $255 million, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, you see, they provide the acquittals, and I'm trying to cut my speech short, Madam Speaker, but they seem to be obviously objecting to it. Madam Speaker, again, they talked about the cost of living. They don't, of course, have a real solution. They talk about reducing VAT, bringing back on the so-called basic food items. Basic food items, Madam Speaker, are not actually basic food items. Madam Speaker, they claim about our manifesto. Madam Speaker, what we've done better than the manifesto. We have, in fact, decreased VAT. They don't mention that. We've decreased VAT from 15% to 9%. Madam Speaker, that is the reality. Madam Speaker, they talk about inflation. If you look at inflation, it is impact by Yongona and various other matters. But what is really critical to understand, they pluck this $4 and $5 an hour out of thin air. Honourable Usamata has very eloquently spoken about that. He's spoken about the consultant who talked and looked at the social wages. And in fact, if you look at recent studies on Fiji, they said because of social wages, we've managed to keep poverty low. Otherwise, people have actually flowed into the poverty trap. Madam Speaker, let me give you an example. If, for example, you increase minimum wage from $2.68 at the moment to say $5, it's almost double. Now, okay, fine, you're all happy. Guess what will happen to the person whose minimum wage at the moment in the 10 sectorial wages is at the moment $5.50 an hour or $6 an hour? What do you think he or she will say? You put these up by almost 100%, I want my 100% too. So they'll go up to $10, $12. Honourable Samasoni, understand the implications. Honourable Chan, understand the implications. So we'll have spiraling out of control inflationary impact of this. of this proposal, Madam Speaker. What we are saying, we need to carefully study it. Madam Speaker, it will push up the price of business, it will push up inflation. Do you think the people who are currently being paid $5.50 an hour will sit back and say, yes, this is great, this unskilled worker who's now getting $5 an hour, I'm quite happy with mine, $5.50, and I'm skilled actually. Do you think they'll sit back? Of course they won't. They'll want it higher. And guess what will happen? Their employer will then put up the price of whatever service they are delivering. That's what will happen. Hotel rates will go up. Are we going to then price ourselves out of the tourism market? Madam Speaker, the fact of the matter is we need to take a principled position. We need to be able to understand what is actually happening in the economy. Madam Speaker, the point of the matter is that even the de facto deputy leader of SODELPA, in one of the speeches she gave at USP, actually said that yes, by proposing $4 an hour, it may have an impact on small businesses and government can come and subsidize. Please check the video, it's there. It's on record. Linda Tambuya, Madam Speaker, of SODELPA, when she gave a lecture at USP, said, yes, by putting up the $4 an hour rate, it may have an impact on small business and government will subsidize. How will government subsidize? How will government subsidize? We'll go around checking, oh, so you employed 5 people, you put it up to $4 an hour, what percentage will we give? How will we monitor that? This is how ridiculous the proposals are, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Ranuru has very quickly made some illogical claims that taxpayers are being burdened because of the fact that our tax revenue collection is increased, Madam Speaker. In fact, our tax threshold is increased. $30,000, people don't pay any taxes. The reason why the revenue has increased, Madam Speaker, because the economy is doing well, people are spending more VAT being collected, and obviously, Madam Speaker, compliance has increased. FERCUS is actually going after people who've been stealing from the system. So compliance is increased, consumption is increased, therefore we are able to increase, Madam Speaker, our income tax rate, tax collection. Honourable Van Dey, who is unfortunately not here, he said that the ordinary Fijians have been lumped with ECAL and STT. No, they have not been lumped. You go down and eat any shop over here, you go and buy anything, you don't pay ECAL and STT unless you go and purchase a service or good from a prescribed business, which is like a cinema, a rental car or a hotel, and the bulk of the revenue from ECAL actually comes from the tourists, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, we had some utterances about Wi-Fi hotspots and wireless C and FBC, Madam Speaker. Again, I think this is the masala being thrown into this again, without necessarily going too much into that. Madam Speaker, the fact of the matter is privacy is protected. Wireless C does not breach privacy. In fact, Madam Speaker, last week we were in Vanmalevu. Excuse me. We were in Vanmalevu, and as I was boarding the plane, we actually went to interview candidates in Vanmalevu. We got some nice stories about NFP there too. But when we were boarding the plane, a taxi driver came up to us and said to us, "Thank you very much for wireless C." He said, "I'm sitting here and watching the World Cup soccer on my phone through one of the, I think it was Fiji 1. He was watching Fiji 1. Madam Speaker, this is the level of empowerment, not just of information, but entertainment and connectivity to the rest of Fiji that wireless is providing, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, of course, we have a huge program on that. Madam Speaker, I don't really want to go into this, but last I want to make a comment on this. And Honourable Prasad actually did mention it because after I harassed him across the floor, I continuously said it to him. Madam Speaker, Honourable Nico Nawaikula had a Facebook post, and he called this budget a racist budget. He called this a racist budget. And his logic, Madam Speaker, and I'm glad Honourable Prasad for the first time, without necessarily mentioning his name, did say he opposed people who said it was a racist budget on the basis of this. Madam Speaker, the fact of the matter is, by allocating $500,000 for the commemoration of the 140th year of arrival of Grimitiers and trying to set up a museum of $300,000 does not make it a racist budget. In fact, Madam Speaker, it is an indication of how he thinks. Seriously. It is, Madam Speaker, an indication of the great calamity that would befall this country if those people were ever to sit on this side. Every single policy, every single decision, every single person they meet will be based on ethnicity. It's a fact. It used to happen, it will happen again. I actually, Madam Speaker, I shut up for my own children, if those people ever came on this side. And I shut up for the future of this generation, of this country, Madam Speaker. And unfortunately, some people are willing to make compromises too. Madam Speaker, the reality is this, that this budget, I don't want to go into the cost of road building, Madam Speaker. You know, they talked about subsidized kidney dialysis, Madam Speaker. You know, we started off giving pension, Madam Speaker, if I could just round it off. We started off giving pension to those people who are over the age of 70, we started giving them $30. Brought down the age to 68, we started giving $50. We brought it down to the age of 65, we started giving $100 because we have the capacity to do so. Because economically we are doing well. In the same way, Madam Speaker, we made an announcement after careful assessment. Dr. Ambrish Krishnan, who is the only nephrologist in the Southern Pacific, we worked with him. He tells us there's about 600 patients that may need to have access to kidney dialysis, of which some of them obviously can afford to use the kidney dialysis on a regular basis. And based on our studies with him, our discussions with him, we have made this announcement that those people who actually will need to pay $150 but earn less than $30,000 will actually subsidize $50. Somebody said, why are we singling out Kidney Foundation? Why? Because, Madam Speaker, the cost is $250. And the nephrologist has told us it should be done for $150. In fact, it should be cheaper. And in fact, we are using him now to the Minister to be able to look at some smart procurement of drugs to be able to bring down the cost even further. So, Madam Speaker, this is the first step. And if you take the first step with a lot of consideration and a lot of input into decision making, then you'll get it right. Madam Speaker, of course, to round off, the opposition has many labels for this budget, but all Fijians know that we've been consistent and responsible. We have lowered the budget deficit to 3.5%. We are continuing to invest in infrastructure development, education, health, medical services and social welfare initiatives. Madam Speaker, the Fiji First government has worked hard to build a legally inclusive society. Legally inclusive society, Madam Speaker, not just lip service. That is not only morally and ethically correct, but also creates loyalty to the country. This, Madam Speaker, actually enhances economic growth, investment, and facilitates a big pool of human resources to continue the growth. We want our young people to stay in Fiji, irrespective of where they come from, irrespective of their province, irrespective of denomination, of their religion. Because we want them all to be contributing Fijians. And that's how we'll grow, Madam Speaker. We'll build a bigger pool of human resources. And that's really our main capital resource, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to thank all the members for the contribution, including the members of the opposition, notwithstanding the fact that it's fairly pedestrian. But, Madam Speaker, the reality is that this budget is for all Fijian families, and we look forward to the debate on this, and I wish everybody to support this budget. Naka, thank you.